Good morning,
No,
breakfast
you're
with
not.
bacon fans. Well, okay, it's not my strong suit. My strong suit is getting amazing guests and asking them questions. So, for those of you that were waiting for today's show, Barbara Amaya has lived a life, let's just say 180, from being forced into victimized sex trafficking, physical abuse. I'm sitting here trying to remember all the things that we want to discuss today, Barbara, but you have been taken from the darkest, ugliest parts of humanity, and now are giving your life, giving others voice, speaking about this, changing hearts, changing souls. And you're a woman for God. So, first of all, welcome to Breakfast with Bacon. I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on today.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Oh gosh, you and I talked for a while, and I wanted to say you are a beautiful soul already. So can we just start at whatever you consider the beginning? All right, we want to take our listeners. I always like to go to where the dark was so that when the light comes, we can kind of share it. So starting with the inevitable, how did you grow up? Did you grow up with this great happy family or not so much?
Yeah, that question, and it's hard for me to start at the beginning of that sometimes, but
Then start where you want to
it,
start.
what I mean by hard to start is, well, you said, did I grow up with a happy family? From the outside, everything looked very happy, right? I mean, originally I grew up in Fairfax, Virginia, one of the, highest cost of living areas in the United States.
Mhm.
Very lovely suburban area, lovely home. The house is still there, actually. And so from the outside, everything looked very happy and great, but it probably looked like that on the outside, but it wasn't, right? What I was experiencing, no child ever should experience in that home. And I don't remember how young I was when some of the things I was experiencing happened to me. I don't remember how young I was when that all began. I don't remember a time when it wasn't that way.
Right.
I don't. I grew up with the abuses I was experiencing for as long as I could remember. So I couldn't put a date on it or an age on it.
And you're talking sexual and physical, or just one or the other?
It was sexual abuse.
At the hands of, are you willing to say?
Yeah, I've written about it in my book, so it's pretty much out into the world. It was my father and a couple of other family members, direct family members.
Yeah.
So,
so they were doing these things.
Sexual abuse, and it wasn't beatings or physical beating, violent abuse like that, but it was sexual abuse. So it was pretty. I guess that is pretty violent. Right.
It is, because abuse is power and control. So, anytime someone uses another person's body, it's to overpower you, to control you, to take what they want. And, when I taught my domestic violence and my sexual assault classes, I always said, as much as it may seem like it, rape is not about sex. It's about power and control. What can I overtake you with? And so you were young when it started, and so tell me what happened then. Did there come a point where you're like, I'm moving out, or how'd you get out into the world? Because then, as is typical in most cases of sex trafficking, you kind of just slide into that lifestyle and don't even realize what just happened because someone else manipulated you. Can you speak to that?
Well, I say, children are vulnerable because they are children. That's, very simple way to break it down. We could just stop right there and say, children are vulnerable because they're children. They already are vulnerable. But if a child's experiencing, as I did, any type of trauma or physical abuse or sexual abuse, they're even more vulnerable, right? And like I said a minute ago, I don't know how old or how young I was when that began. But I was taken out of that home. I was taken out and I went through the systems. I went through foster care system, juvenile justice system. I was labeled, and I've seen the actual records. I have them. I was labeled incorrigible and uncontrollable, which to me is kind of funny because I was obviously very controllable.
Right.
But so I was a very young child, probably 8, 9, 10 when I was taken out of that home, and went into the system.
Right.
And the actual juvenile detention center, which is in Alexandria, Virginia, still there, and several different institutions, and I think that what they used to call a reform school, which is basically a prison for children up in Richmond,
For
Virginia.
troubled children. My mom went to one, as you and I had discussed, because she too was sexually abused. And then, they act out, you act out on that. And then, so the people who don't know is like, oh, you're a troublemaker, without realizing what's
blamed. The child is labeled and blamed for what's happening to them, which is pretty horrible. So those places are still there. One of the places I was sent to was a Catholic boarding school, and then foster care, different homes, just multiple different institutions and places and schools, and just in the system, the juvenile system. But it was multiple places, because every place they put me in, I'd managed to escape and run away from. Every single place I would manage to run away and get out of somehow. Every single place that I was put into, every home I was put into, I would run away. I was constantly running away, dozens and dozens and dozens of times. I didn't even know, I was a child. I didn't know what I was running from or to, but I was running away, all the time. And
when you would run,
excuse me,
can I ask it? So my poor guest today is being affected,
allergies,
controlled by that stupid, evil pollen. And so I want you to thank her with me for being a guest, because I offered another opportunity, but she's very kind and wants to get the story out there. So we're just going to go with what Mother Nature is doing to her nose right now. So did any of your foster parents abuse you physically or sexually as well? Or did you have what we call good foster families?
I don't know about great or good, but I didn't experience sexual abuse in any of the foster homes I was in. Probably some physical abuse in different places I was at, different institutions, wasn't great. I know in that one place they had us cleaning the floor with toothbrushes and stuff like that, different types of punishment. So it definitely wasn't a good place, no.
So take us to the sex trafficking then, because I had another woman on my show years ago. She was a regular guest, and she's like you, as a speaker. And she said, I didn't even realize I was being trafficked when I was being forced to do these evil things. And so you kind of got into that lifestyle. And there was a guy who, and of course we have a guest appearance behind you. And who is our guest?
I'm just going to ignore him. Wait a minute.
What is it?
It's okay. I don't know what he's.
So tell us the transition from, you didn't have a great childhood, into now you're in this lifestyle. You've got a pimp who was actually a trafficker. How did connect us from one to the other? And then we'll jump ahead into when the one day you realized, oh my gosh, I was trafficked.
Well, like I said, children are vulnerable because they're children. And I was very vulnerable because of the earlier abuse that I'd had experienced in my life, in my young life. And I was running away all the time and didn't know what I was running to. All children need certain things, right? They need love. They need security, discipline. They need a home. They need a roof over their head. They need clothing. They need food. But, and they need love and security and all that stuff. And I wasn't getting that. So I was running away, running here and there, trying to find whatever I thought I needed in life. And I had run away from Richmond, Virginia, a place in Richmond, Virginia. And I had made my way back to Washington, D.C. And it was a woman. I was sitting in a park in Washington, D.C. And it was a woman in the park, pretty young woman there, started talking to me. And, I didn't have anywhere to go. I had no clothing. I had no food. She told me I could come and stay with her at her house and, her apartment. I went back with her there, and there was her boyfriend, which was actually her trafficker. Now when I look back through the lens of who I am today, I think, this woman, this young, maybe she had been a victim herself one day, who knows? But what I know now is that she'd been sent out to recruit and find,
Other
runaways,
victims.
young girls, other victims, and bring them back. So that's
Isn't
what
there
I
a
know
name
now.
for that woman? Isn't there a name for those people, like the mama or something? Or saw
Well,
a
there's all
movie.
kinds of different labels, but I try not to give labels or use
Okay.
statistics if I can. But
But that was her role. She was being trafficked, but she was
well,
being controlled.
what was their role with this young woman and her trafficker? Actually, I can jump ahead in the narrative that I'm giving. I mean, what it was they were actually they were finding victims to sell to the trafficker in New York, which is where I ended up at. So that's what that was. It was a police officer asked me one time, was this organized crime? And I said, no. But when I shared my complete story, he said, yes, it was, because they were actually, the trafficker from New York, where I ended up at, had people in multiple major cities funneling him victims. So it was definitely very organized, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
but I'm jumping ahead in my story, but so at any rate, she took me back to her apartment where her trafficker was. And they began, I used to struggle with this word quite a bit, because there's just different, words are very powerful, and I'm trying to be very careful about the words that I choose to use, because they're very powerful. But at any rate, they began to groom me for purposes of prostitution. That's what they began to do. And she began taking me out to different places where adult men would buy my body or seek to buy my body. And I mean, I never saw any of the money myself, and it really didn't mean anything to me because I was a child. It meant something to them. They were collecting the money. That went on for few weeks. And one day they took me to the corner of 14th and I Streets in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And they handed me over to the trafficker from New York City. Okay. And before they handed me over, I knew something was different that day. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew something was different than all the previous other days when they'd been taking me here and there. I couldn't quite figure it out, but he took me to New York that day. I never saw them again. I never saw those two people again in my life. And I was under his control for over a decade.
Yeah.
I was almost 13 by then. And by the time I left New York, when I left New York City, I didn't know how old I was. I was so traumatized. I had no ID. I didn't know how old I even was at that point. I used so many different aliases, so many different dates of birth, so many, and like I said, no ID. I'd been living in a criminal underworld. I had no idea what was happening in the real world, completely isolated in a criminal underworld. Right. Yeah. So he controlled me for over a decade. And, that was I could talk about that for hours and hours, and go more into that. But they handed me over to him and I never saw them again. He had people sending him victims from all over the place. I wasn't the only victim or person that he controlled. He had many other victims under his control.
Just saying though, Barbara, that you were 13, I think if my viewers / listeners can stop right there and think of their own children, their own grandchildren. I mean, young girls are just having periods. Young girls are just kind of learning their bodies, going from playing with dolls to, a boy is cute. And granted, I know some people are sexually active these days, but we're still looking at a little girl. And you at that age were already forced by your own family member, your own dad took away the most precious thing from you and other family members. Then this other, woman and man who tried to make it seem like they were looking out for you. They stole from you, that, which of course seems so normal to you in one sense, because that's all people ever wanted. And
I've been sexualized, so very early on,
right?
Very, very early on. And that's what's happening. That's, what's happening now with young girls, right. But it happened with me very, very, very early on. And I remember before I ended up in Washington and in New York City. I remember when I was still out in Fairfax, I used to put on long baggy clothes and I used to try to hide because it seemed like
if they couldn't see
men
you.
were just after me everywhere I went, this little blonde kid, and I was just inundated, and I was sexualized very early on, So yeah, so that when, that's I was the type of child, the type of girl that traffickers look for. I was the perfect walking target, right?
Yeah, and when we talked, you said everybody wants to know about, the stuff that happens. And I told you I don't like to exploit, but for the sake of finding a happy medium, when they do those bad things to you, are they hurting you all the time too? I mean, sexual hurt is obvious, but you mentioned to me the evil of your trafficker would take a hanger and he would beat you
Well,
with it.
I mean, control, it's my belief that the trafficker's main method of control is it's up here,
Right.
it's up here. It's the formation of a trauma bond. It's a psychological hold, right? Which he started to put into place the very night that he met me. He made sure that I saw on the way to New York that I saw that he had a gun in his belt. He made sure that he positioned himself as my protector, that he was going to take care of me, that nothing horrible was ever going to happen to me again in my life, that he understood exactly what I'd been through, and he didn't. I used to say when I started speaking, I used to say he didn't have sex with me that night, but that wouldn't have been sex because he was an adult man and I was a child. It would have been rape, but he didn't do that. He didn't. And that was very purposeful, on purpose by him, because he knew that would have changed the whole dynamic of that relationship, right? So he was positioning himself from the very beginning as my protector, and he was going to, make sure that I was safe and everything was going to be fantastic and wonderful. And the formation of a psychological bond began to be put into place from the minute that I met him, right? From the minute that I met him. People might have heard of Stockholm Syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Trauma bonding is that's exactly what it is. I get asked all the time, well, why didn't you just leave? How could that be possible? How could you be under someone's control and exploitation for over a decade? Why didn't you get on an airplane or take a taxi or go to the bus station? Because that bond, I began to bond with this person. And you were just talking about physical violence. Well, like I said, that psychological bond gets put into place. And also there's the physical violence that traffickers use. Obviously, there's a certain number of rules that are involved in that I don't want to call it a lifestyle. It's not a lifestyle. In that criminal underworld. And one of them is, you will listen to whatever I say, and you will bring me a certain amount of money. And if you don't, this is what's going to happen to you. And there was violence at the hands of the, I don't call them Johns because that word is completely ridiculous to me. There's no innocent little person named John sitting anywhere. There weren't customers to me. It wasn't a business arrangement to me. I mean, I would say rapists or people that seek to buy someone, another human, whatever you want to call them. But the hands of those people was, there was a lot of violence as well. A lot of violence, but also at the hand of this person, this trafficker, who, by the way, his street name was Moses. I have his real legal name. I know his name. He, by the way, he died in prison. He's not on this earth anymore, but his street name, he called himself Moses. And he would tattoo a little cross on his victims' hands, kind of a property type of a tag.
Branding.
Yeah.
Do you still have that, or did you have it removed?
No, I still have it. It's still on there. Right.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And when you talked to me on the phone last time, you said the name Moses was kind of intentional as well, making it look like this big prophet, or, I'm here like a God figure kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, everything he did was very purposeful, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
But
so I just, we could talk about all the dark stuff, but I think we've painted pretty much a picture that, wow. So how did you escape? When you get to 23, what happened that you're finally able to break? Because for those of you watching, my guest today, Barbara Amaya, was a sex trafficking victim. And I say was because She is not a victim today. She's a survivor. She is a speaker. She is an author. She has taken back control of her life. Yeah, we all have consequences and remnant and I don't know what you want to call it, Barbara, but kind of like the residual of our lifestyle. But she took back
Well,
her life, and that could not have been easy. Was that something you actively saw God in, or did you not know who God was till you were older? What happened?
oh no, I didn't I didn't acknowledge my faith or God until much later in my life, but I do know now that God was definitely had a purpose for me in my life, or I wouldn't
Mhm.
be alive right now. I mean,
No.
I literally would not be alive right now. I
Well,
mean,
because
I
you
didn't
said you were
have
stabbed. Tell me a
I
couple of
would.
those. Weren't you almost stabbed? Weren't you almost a victim of a serial murderer? What were the things that you said you had to live through? And then we'll jump ahead because you're right. This was not just a normal life and a girl who was forced to, you were constantly saved by the grace of God, even though you didn't realize it back then.
Yeah, I've been definitely wouldn't I should I'm often catch my breath and I'm amazed that I'm walking on the earth. No, I mean I've been yes, I have been stabbed and shot and thrown out of cars and thrown downstairs and multiple beatings. I have scars and broken cartilage here and everything. I mean I have multiple wounds from being hurt. I've overdosed on heroin up in Harlem, where normally they throw you out of a window up there. If you overdose on heroin in a room full of other junkies, usually they just throw you out the window. But for some reason they revived me and I didn't die. So that's just one example
Wow.
of of God keeping me on this earth. Um, I was in Rikers Island prison. One of the things that happened to me when I was in the streets of New York City under the control of the trafficker was I was arrested many, many times, even though I was the victim. I never thought of myself as a victim. I actually thought this was all my idea. That's part of the manipulation that traffickers use.
Right.
I don't think I was a dumb child. I was a damaged child, and I was very vulnerable. So at any rate,
Did you like going to jail? I heard some people
extreme
have said
violence.
because you can get away from the trafficker for a short time and you are able to eat food when they don't always feed you. What was it like for you when you would get arrested?
No, I mean, well, I would I was arrested so many, many times, and I can share how that kind of went when you were arrested if you'd like.
Yeah,
I'd
sure,
be out.
please. I have
I'd,
no idea.
I'd be out on the street. I'd be out on the street with everyone else, and the police would kind of come through and swoop down, and everybody would run and try to get away, and they would come through the police and just chase people down, and they would throw us in the back of a
Paddy
van
wagon.
and handcuff everybody together in a long chain of handcuff everybody together. And it all went really, it went fast, like very fast. You were taken down to the police station and you were asked, what's your name? What's your date of birth? What's your address? Where do you live? And I'd already been drilled into my head to say some false alias name and some date of birth. I'm 21 or whatever. I had it all memorized in my head. And you'd be taken to the police station. The next morning, you'd be taken to 100 Center Street in Manhattan to the court building. And this part always just got to me because they would take us out all chained together when everybody else was going to work, early in the morning, going about their day. And I felt a deep sense of shame. I felt so horrible. I wanted to say, no, 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 no. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. You're not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here. So they'd take us all chained together into the back of the court, and we'd be put into a holding pen in back of the courtrooms. And in that holding pen, things just got very, very, very violent. I mean, people were being beaten, and it was the people that were in the holding pen, beating each other up and fights, and it was horrible. It was so violent.
Wow.
Then you would be taken in front of the judge. You'd be given a court-appointed attorney, and there was no question about pleading guilty. There was no discussion. There was you just pleaded guilty, and you were in front of the judge, plead guilty, given some paperwork, and thrown back out. And you would go back. I would go back to wherever I was staying, and Moses would be there. And if I didn't have the amount of money that I was supposed to give him, that's when I would be beaten. to a pulp and sent back out to the street again to collect whatever money he said that I had to have. So one time I went through that whole process, and I was sent, instead of being released, I was sent to Rikers Island prison. I think at that point I was probably 15 or 16. And at that point, by the time I was 15 or 16, I was heavily addicted to heroin. And it wasn't him, Moses, that gave me the drugs. Everybody always assumes that he got me addicted to heroin so he could manipulate me. But he was already manipulating and exploiting me. Why should he waste money on heroin?
Right.
It was another young woman out on the track, out on the street, that introduced me to heroin. And that drug completely took over my body and my mind and numbed me to what I was having to experience. It actually kept me being able to move one foot forward. It was very effective numbing of my mind, and so at that point, when I went to Rikers Island, I was heavily addicted to heroin. And that whole process, from being arrested, being in the police station, going in front of the court, getting on a bus, being taken to Rikers Island, you're a couple days in to this process. I was physically ill, very physically sick into the withdrawal process. And for the first time, I broke through the programming that he'd put into my head, and I just wanted to get out. I just wanted to get out so I could go get more drugs. That's the reason I wanted to get out. Plus, I was terrified because being in Rikers Island prison on that type of a charge was very, very dangerous. If I had gone into the prison system on a murder charge, I would have been well respected among the criminal element, right? But I was going in on, loitering for the purposes of, or whatever it was, some not respected charge in the criminal underworld. So I was terrified, and I was sick, and I knew I had to get out. So I started telling the guards and everybody there that that wasn't my real name, that I wasn't 21, that I was from Fairfax, Virginia, and I wanted to get out and go home. They didn't believe me. Nobody believed me. And finally, they did believe me. And they said my parents were coming to pick me up all the way from Fairfax to New York City. And I hadn't seen them in a few years, and I was terrified. I was so scared. I didn't know what I was going to tell them. I didn't know what they were thinking. And this is my blood mother and father, not a foster family, right? And they took me down the hall to go see my parents. They were going to release me. And they opened the door, and it was my trafficker standing there. It was Moses. It wasn't my mother and father. I'll never forget that. It was him. They opened the door, and it was him. And I was just like, I couldn't, to this day, fathom how that happened. I don't know how that happened. And I can't say that I turned around and went, nope, I'm not going to leave with him. Of course I left with him. I left, and from what I understand, my mother told me they missed me by 5 or 10 minutes. They came to Rikers Island prison to pick me up. And it wasn't my time to leave New York then. I didn't leave. And so I stayed under his control for many more years. But what I want people to understand is that it's not, one of his rules was no reading or writing. I was in a completely different world than the normal workadays we call square, like regular people working, I had no clue how to do anything. I didn't do laundry. I didn't cook food. There were so many different things that in a normal life that I never learned how to do. Right.
Right. Because you had to spend all of your minutes, all of your hours doing these evil things for this man who would kill you if you didn't.
I was waking up when people were going to sleep. It's a completely different existence. And
so you had that one moment, Barbara, and you said that lucidity where you're like, I'm this age, this is my name, I want to go home. And then you see this evil trafficker there. Did anything change in your mind? Like, I'm going to try to find a way to get out, or did you see yourself kind of falling right back into the mindset? Because you got out eventually. So there had to be another moment of lucidity.
Well, at that point, when I left with him that day, like I said, I was very heavily addicted to drugs, to heroin, physically addicted to heroin. And I was constantly trying to get away from him, to run away from him, because I couldn't give I couldn't give money to drugs and give money to him. It was just impossible. It was too much. It was just physically impossible. Right. So that went on for, many more years. I'm trying to put my glasses on. That went on for many more years. That went on from 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. And there came a day I was still very, very, very heavily addicted to drugs. I was 5'9", 99 pounds, probably. I knew I wasn't going to be on this earth very much longer. I probably was going to die soon. I came to that realization. I knew I wasn't going to be around, and I knew I had to do something. I I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't physically do this, the drugs and him and the beatings and the violence. I pulled myself into a clinic in Manhattan, on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And I think this part of my story is really important. When I went into that clinic, all I wanted to do was try to get off of drugs. That's all I was trying to do. It was the woman at the front desk. She was a receptionist. She wasn't a counselor. She wasn't a therapist. She wasn't a doctor. She was the receptionist that does it, not even an intake person, just kind of saying, hi, what's your name? What are you here for? But this was definitely God, because she, for whatever reason, gave me eye contact, looked me in my face, and treated me like a fellow human being.
Wow.
I didn't feel judgment. I didn't feel any of that. What I felt was it washed over me that she saw me.
Your humanity.
She saw me as a fellow human. She wasn't judgmental. She wasn't tisk, nothing, none of that. She went above and beyond her scope of work. That wasn't her job. What happened next? She started asking me what I liked, and this went on for weeks. It wasn't just all in that one afternoon when I met her. She asked me what I liked and what did I, just she befriended me. She treated me like a fellow human being. It took me to get clothing to go on a job interview. She sent me on a job interview at a veterinary clinic, which was hysterical because that's the last thing I would ever have known how to do. But anyway, I went on the job interview. It was like sending a cat on a job interview, a feral cat. But I went. I didn't get the job, but I went. But what she did find out was that my family, my older sister, was living in nearby Philadelphia. And Anita, her name was Anita, propelled me out of New York City. That's how I got out of New York City.
Well, can I stop you? I need to stop you. So how did you just walk into this clinic? Wasn't Moses following you? Did he know you were going there? Did you just one day leave we don't want to call it a John, you said a handler, whatever. Did you just walk out and walk to this place? Well, what possessed you to walk into it?
Well, like I said, I had been, at that point, I was so heavily addicted to heroin,
Right.
5'9", 99 pounds, like a walking skeleton. And I'd been running off for years, a long time, running off and hiding from him wherever.
You kind of got off the track.
I mostly lived in hotels a lot. I didn't have a home. I would live in hotels. But anyway, I would run off and hide from him. And, sometimes he would find me and beat me up and drag me back. And sometimes he wouldn't find me and drag me back. But I couldn't give the money.
Yeah.
Pardon?
It was one of those moments where I'm running away from him.
Well, I probably at that exact day, I'd been away from him for a few days or whatever it was. But now looking back on it, at that time, what I didn't know, what I know now, is that he had been arrested. And he had been extradited. He wasn't even in Manhattan. He wasn't even in New York. He'd been arrested on drugs and weapons charges and he'd been extradited to Akron, Ohio. And he had been imprisoned in Akron, Ohio on charges that I knew nothing about. I didn't have any idea where he was. At that exact moment when I pulled myself into this clinic,
Wow.
he wasn't even there in the city, so everything just came together.
Yeah, so you walked into this clinic and Anita is befriending you. Did she know what you did? I mean, I'm guessing most of the girls your age that skinny on heroin, maybe she suspected.
She probably did. Yeah. I mean, I didn't have to. Yeah. I don't remember, laying it out for her. She didn't say, "Are you doing la, la, la?" And she knew. Yeah.
Yeah, what a grace. And to have a place to stay and to have somehow money. I don't, did you pay for it with money you were supposed to give Moses? You don't know anything because you were still on heroin at that time.
But
when you checked yourself in, you stayed actually physically in the unit, right? You were trying to get.
No, this wasn't an intake. It wasn't an inpatient facility.
Okay.
It was
Yeah, so
actually
that's my point. Where did you stay? Where'd you have the money? Where'd you have the wherewithal? Here you are trying to break an addiction, run away from this horrible human being.
no, I was doing whatever I was doing to get. I mean, nothing was stopping as far as prostitution or anything. I mean, that's how I continue to get money for heroin.
But you checked. Okay, that's what I didn't see. Yeah, I thought maybe when you got away from him, you got away from that. So you were still only getting clean of the heroin and you still had to earn money. And this time you got to keep the money to pay for this.
I think you're no. I mean, of course, like I said, sometimes he would find me and drag me back. Sometimes he wouldn't. The heroin was there. He was there. Everything was still. It was still the same,
Okay.
I mean, he would drag me back or he wouldn't drag me back. I'd see him next week or I wouldn't see him next week. But that very day that you're talking about, he wasn't even in New York.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Forgive all my questions. I am one of those squares that you talked about because I didn't live that life. So to me, I feel this in my mind, why I'm asking those, I see this horrible person with eyes all over the town. Someone's always watching you not being able to escape. So just getting into this clinic, running away from him. Okay, that made sense. But then I'm thinking maybe you step outside, they find you, so I'm just thinking, here's what I'm getting at, Barbara. Courage. The courage it took for you to just keep going forward while healing yourself was tremendous. I mean, things had to have lined up.
I didn't, know where he was. I had no idea for decades. I had no idea where he was during that time in my life. I had no idea. I grew up in the streets of New York while I was being trafficked. My brain was formed, my prefrontal cortex, everything was forming while I was being trafficked. That's the only thing I knew how to do. I have a sixth grade formal education. So I had no idea where he was while I was addicted to heroin and he was dragging me back. He wasn't dragging me back. All I know is I was trying to hide from him and I was glad I wasn't seeing him.
And I'm just trying to get into the miraculous component. I didn't need to kind of like make you remember this and this, because to someone like me, I just see you not escaping. And the fact that you escaped at all, that God lined up the fact that you had the wherewithal to go. First of all, you're on heroin, you needed to go, and you needed to go that day. And that God also lined up at that same time, Moses is in prison somewhere else, that he also put in the pan, have Anita there that made you feel human, that he also gave you the strength to keep coming back since it's outpatient. I mean, there was a lot going on that made you have an inner strength that maybe by your age you recognize now, but I'm seeing like, how on earth, because many other girls in your situation were dead.
It didn't all happen in one day. I mean, when I met her that day and, I saw and I felt that she saw me as a fellow human being. And, I don't remember the exact conversation, whatever. I told to come back the next day or whatever. I ended up, going up to her apartment and having dinner 2 days later, whatever. This was a long process of her.
Right.
However, she found my family members in Philadelphia. I don't know how she did that. But I must have given her names or whatever I gave. I don't remember. But at any rate, she, like I said, had sent me on a job interview. She was trying to kind of get me out of the street somehow, but that wasn't. Took a little more training about job interviews to
Yeah.
Anyway, but what she did do was she found out that my family member was living in Philadelphia, and she got me on a train to Philadelphia. It was actually the holiday season, Christmas, snowing. It was like a movie. You know, I left New York. I think I had a few belongings in a trash bag or whatever I had. I didn't have a suitcase. And I left New York, and I don't remember thinking, I'm never coming back here ever again. I don't remember consciously thinking that, but I'm pretty sure subconsciously I was there. So I left New York, took a train from New York to Philadelphia. It was very close. It's not that far, a train ride.
Mm-hmm.
And came up out of the train station. It was snowing. People were running around with gifts. There were big Christmas tree decorations everywhere. And when you're surviving what I did, that life, if you want to call it a life, there's no holidays. There's no days off. There are no gifts. Okay. So that whole thing, coming up out of the train station, seeing everybody running around with gifts and trees and lights and stores and all this stuff, it all was so surreal to me. It just felt like a movie or something, you know. And I went to the piece of paper, to the address on the piece of paper that I'd been given, the address where my sister was, where my family was supposed to be gathered. And I went there, and I went outside and took a taxi, and I went there, and there was nobody there. There was nobody at the address, because they'd actually gone to the train station to pick me up.
Oh.
But it never dawned on me that anybody would come to pick me up. At any rate, eventually we're all sitting around the holiday table, Christmas holiday table. My family, my blood family, my mother, my father, my brother, 2 brothers, my sister, a couple of in-laws. They hadn't seen me since I was a little child. And it was very, 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 very surreal. And I started remembering different things about why I left in the first place when I was a child. You know, different memories are coming back, and I'm thinking, oh wow, this isn't good. But I didn't. But I stayed, and I did not go back to New York City. I stayed in Philadelphia for a short while. However, I didn't tell anyone what happened to me. I wasn't telling, oh, I was a victim of human trafficking. La, 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 la. I wasn't telling anybody what happened to me, because I didn't realize I had been a victim.
Right.
And that's a really important point. If we get no other points across during this, I really want people to understand. I didn't think I was a victim.
That's because of the mind games.
Excuse me. I don't remember hearing the term human trafficking victim. I don't remember ever hearing that. I really thought I was doing whatever I was doing in New York City for all this time, giving him billions and thousands and millions of dollars because I wanted to do that. Like, that was my choice.
Right.
But choice is a very tricky word. You know, choice is a very tricky word. Sometimes there's not a choice being made at all, right? But at any rate,
and people need to know, here's a man taking hangers and wire hangers and flaying your flesh with it. And there's not choice. There's fear, there's terror. There's, like we said at the beginning, the power and control. So Barbara, you're having this Christmas dinner with your family. What happened in your life to get you to, so that we're talking, you know, now you're kind of past your 50s, and that was a lifetime ago. When did you start seeing who Barbara Amaya was?
I didn't. Do you mean coming
Share
to
any details you want? Yeah,
realization that I was a victim of human trafficking?
Well, no, I feel like, when did you finally, because like you feel human today. Well, apart from the fact that you have allergies and it's killing you. But you feel human. You speak around the nation. You have done a TED Talk. You are, you know, paid to share your story. So you have entered the world of the square people, right? Us normal people, as you refer to us.
Sort of. No.
Right. But so did there ever come a point where you kind of saw that old life as a past life and now you're in the new life? Or did you just kind of keep putting one foot in front of the other? And then one day you woke up and went, wow, that's behind me. You know what I mean?
I never, and when I say I never, I'm also saying for all the many other victims and survivors that I know and that I don't know, that we are all unique, but we do not self-identify as victims. I've heard so many different stories, and that's a major issue for service providers to try to provide service for someone they don't even know they need services or are a victim, or a prosecutor to try to convince a victim to testify against a trafficker that doesn't think that was a trafficker, So victims that don't self-identify as victims is a huge issue. And for me, like I said, I'm in Philadelphia, not telling anybody what happened to me. Nobody knows what happened to me. Not that many of those people then even asked me exactly what happened to this decade-long period. Where were you? That wasn't a conversation, but that's okay. I wasn't telling anybody what happened to me. Nobody really knew what I'd been through, and I held a deep, deep shame over everything that had happened to me all those years. I carried all of that myself. I thought it all been my idea, and it was all on me. And it was a whole lot of shame and just deep, I wasn't telling anybody what I'd been or what I'd done, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do with my life. What am I supposed to do? I don't know. Am I supposed to get married? Am I supposed to get an education, go back and finish my 6th grade education? Am I supposed to get a job, have a child? What am I supposed to do? And I tried to do a lot of those things. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. Because of my health and not having any health
care
coverage or any doctors or any exams for decades, I was an infertility patient when I did get married to try to have a child. We had to go through all of that. I could just go on and on. But what brought me
that's our guest, our unpaid guest.
What brought me to get out. Stop it. Sorry, big boy.
For those of you listening and not watching, there is a wild tiger crawling on her curtains behind her. Kitty cat's name is what?
Big boy.
Big boy.
He's a big boy. It's okay, buddy. Anyway, he's like, why are the curtains closed? I don't understand.
Right.
That's what he's trying to investigate. But I came to the realization after all these decades of holding everything in, not telling anybody what happened to me, never thinking I was a victim, just kind of trying to do what I should do, put my life together somehow.
To live.
Getting married, not getting married, having a child, all these different things. It was in 2012, 2013, maybe end of 2012. I was right here in this house, right in this living room. And I was in a very, very dark, dark place, because I can't say I really like the human race very much. Very dark, dark, dark depression, dark, dark place. And the news was on the television, and it was kind of rambling on about this case in Northern Virginia and human trafficking. And I wasn't really paying attention. And then they started talking about it happened about a mile from here, this case where they arrested these gang members for trafficking young women, human trafficking. They kept saying human trafficking. And then they started talking about the recruitment techniques that these gang members were using to exploit these young women here in Northern Virginia. And I had a true epiphany. I truly had that aha moment. I stood up right here. I turned up the volume and I went, what are they talking about? That's what happened to me. That's exactly what happened to me. What? And I just had that true aha moment, and I got very angry. I got very angry that it was still happening today.
Yes.
Because I think as human beings, when we experience any type of a trauma, we think it's fascinating. We think we're the only ones that this is happening to. I don't know what that is. But at any rate, we don't think it's happening to someone else. So when I realized that it was still happening, all I had was at that point in 2013 was some vague idea of, I have to help people. I have to say something. I have to make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. That, what happened to me, I have to do something. And within a week or a few days, I was on, that same news channel sharing my story, and I just started propelling me forward. That's what happened.
Wow. You are amazing. You really should. Apart from the grace of God, you should have been dead. You said to me earlier on the phone calls, besides the fact that you were stabbed and you were shot and there was a serial killer that you were in close contact with, you never got pregnant or never had to have an abortion. God protected you from that. God protected you from an STD. God protected you in so many ways for such a time as this. And here you are, this beautiful woman, a survivor of the most evil part of humanity. You have a voice, you have a courage, you have you have a poise that many people you shouldn't have apart from the grace of God. Do you know that yet? Have you seen that yet?
I
You believe me?
I mean, sometimes I believe people more than others when they say this,
Believe me.
oh, you're so strong. La, la. I'm like, well, maybe. No. What I know today is that there are some things that are never going to go. I have an official diagnosis of complex PTSD and blah, blah, blah. I have, multiple health issues. I have CML leukemia. I have cancer today again. And it's no mystery to me why I have cancer so much in my life, because it's all related to trauma, right? But thank you. I mean, I do sometimes, it does, like I said before, it does hit me that I think, whoa, I shouldn't be here. I do believe, what I believe today is that the reason that I'm here is so that I can, if anyone is helped by, my book or my TED Talk or any of the talks or the trainings that I do, then that's the reason why I'm here.
Amen. Amen to that. When did you realize God? When did God become a thing in your life?
I think God has always been a thing in my life, but
When
it's
did you
something that,
recognize it?
my faith, recognize, because, I always said, hold my faith close to my heart. I don't know in my TED Talk if I mentioned my faith at all. It wasn't, it's something that I just always just held close to my heart. It's been in the last probably 2 years that I think that I've really started to speak out more about my faith and really, kind of acknowledge that publicly when I'm on that stage or speaking. When I returned from New York, my mother had a box with 4 photos in it and my childhood Bible, a little white Bible, those little white leather Bibles with the little zipper across thing.
Yes.
It's like pretty much disintegrated, but I have it. And, and I have began to, what did you say? Recognize or acknowledge
When
my
did you
faith.
see? Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe that day in 2013, when I came to that realization, wait, whoa, that's what happened to me. And I'm here and I have a voice and I shouldn't be here. We don't have enough time here to go into every single reason and everything that happened to me, why I shouldn't be here. We've talked about a few of them, but my book, I have it here.
Let's talk about it.
What is my book here?
Yeah.
Here's my
So
book.
Nobody's Girl, written by Barbara and Amaya.
My publisher is out of Pittsburgh, but the subtitle, we had a little discussion on the title of the book, but the subtitle is A Memoir of Lost Innocence, Modern Day Slavery and Transformation. And I kind of insisted upon that word transformation being in my book, but this book is 247 pages long. It could have been 2 million pages long, but it's not. Right. Because, it can't be that long because everybody's attention spans are so short in today's world. But it does cover my whole story, and it does include a guide in the back for parents, teachers, young men and women, law enforcement, and medical personnel. It kind of has some words of wisdom and information for those different populations. I kind of wanted that to make sure that was included in my book. It is available on Amazon, but I think people should buy it directly from me so that I can autograph it for you. Okay,
and how do they do that, Barbara? How do they find them?
But it's also on Audible too, and I know a lot of students do get the book on Kindle or Audible or however because they don't want to. They can contact me directly through my website.
And that's BarbaraAmaya.com.
BarbaraAmaya.com, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then BARBARAAMAYA. But you're looking at this show. It's right here in the link, you guys. So go to Barbara. A whole bunch
of A's.
A lot of A's. BarbaraAmaya.com, and go ahead and get a copy of this book because you want to help her save other women, other boys, other girls from being victimized like she was and recognize what it takes. When I had the other young woman on my show, sex trafficked for years, she said the same thing you said, Barbara. She goes, I didn't realize he convinced me that I wanted to do this, that I was made to do this, that I was doing this. And I thought, wow, and if we don't listen, because I've heard people say, oh, prostitutes, they want to do it. My own daughters and I have had that conversation. I said, no, they don't. There's not a single prostitute or someone who's been prostituted that wants to do that. Speak to that.
That's a conversation that could spend, several more hours on. I think I mentioned that
You
today.
did to me.
One of my beliefs is, awareness, education, and legislation, if you want to make a dent in this issue. And one of the bills that I definitely testified against was the decriminalization of prostitution in our nation's capital. And there were two sides to this. I won't go really deeply into it, but there were two sides in that room. There were the pro
decriminalize it,
and then there were the against. And the reason I'm talking about this is because you said nobody wakes up and says, yeah, this is what I want to do today, and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I know that in today's world, there's the Me Too, there's all these movements, and I understand we do have the right to do whatever we want to do with our own bodies. That's very true. But I will say this: I never once, when I was out on the street, had anybody come up to me ever and say to me, wow, I am so empowered. I feel so fantastic today because I just had to do that with 20 people today and I feel great. That's not true. I'm sorry, it's not. And forget about trafficking, or prostitute, whatever you want to call it, or however you think your experience, whatever you think your experience is, that's not empowering. Of course, sex is a healthy, normal bodily function. Of course,
in the right order.
Of course.
With the right person in the right order.
Of course it is, but the
commodification,
turning another human being into a commodity or viewing another human being as a commodity is not a healthy thing. So sorry.
Yeah, no, don't apologize, because there are people that have this argument going, how can you say, and and my own daughters who went to Catholic school and who were raised by me are like, well, some girls like doing that. I'm like, no, not with some man who's just, anyway. So
it takes forget about trafficking, trafficker involved, and say, okay, you're over the age of 21 and you think this is your choice. It still takes something out of you every time you do that. It takes something out of you physically and mentally every time you lower yourself. It does. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah, and I know people that they're going to disagree with what I'm saying, but that's what I believe. That's what I know. Yeah,
exactly. I don't care what those people think. No offense to any of you, because you didn't live it. You don't know it. And you haven't talked to anybody in that lifestyle. And, shame on all the men and the people who pay money to do that too. It's like, why? You can't find your own girlfriend. You can't have a healthy relationship. No, this is someone else's daughter. Period.
This could go, like I said, this conversation could go on for hours and hours and hours, but the sexualization of, children are taught to, at such an early age, from being online and from seeing all this media, from seeing, Halloween costumes that are just completely
trashy. Make a little girl look,
yeah. And I'm far from a prudish person or whatever. That's not me. But sexualization of children and bringing up young men and boys to view a female as someone that they can purchase is just not.
Because you've seen it, it. I bet not one single one of those men who had to give you money to do what they wanted you to do to their body said, how are you? Did you have a good day? Thank you so much. Right? None of them treated you like the human that you were.
No, and there were a few times, of course, over those many years that I attempted to try to say, hey, can you help me do, whatever, can you please help me get out of the situation? I'm sure there were a few times when I begged someone to help me, but, it didn't happen. That was the last thing.
Right. So let's take it to today. So I think someone caught you, said, what? I have cancer. So you are a speaker. You're still struggling with cancer, but you speak. What is the number one thing you love speaking about? If you could say, here's my life and here's my greatest purpose is found in this. What
You mean what?
action? Yeah,
Pardon?
Your mission. So your mission, you're out there, you're speaking, you wrote a book. When do you feel most fulfilled? Maybe that's the better way to phrase it.
I just, I have so many topics that I speak about today. When I first started doing this in 2013, I would just, get up on a stage and just share my story for an hour and get down and leave, and it's just evolved and changed over the years. I speak about so many different subtopics
Like what?
that are
Share
involved in this
those.
issue. Well, the connection between opiates and trafficking. One of the connections, health. I'm really developed a whole initiative about survivors of sex trafficking and physical health. Because I try to look at my life. I try to look at my life, and I try to see what lessons I can learn from whatever it may be, from day to day or from the past or whatever it is. And one of the things has been my physical health and the physical health of every other survivor that I know. Every other survivor that I know has some type of a physical health issue. Sorry, the cat's claiming something. And and I know why, because they experienced all this trauma, and they probably didn't have any health care the entire time, or even if they did, all that trauma just took such a horrible toll on their body. And at every conference and every event or every keynote or every training that I do, people speak about the mental health of survivors of sex trafficking, but they don't normally speak about the physical lifelong effects of being trafficked.
Yeah, never going to a doctor, never going to a dentist, never going.
Yeah, the emergency room was my doctor. The emergency room, if anything happened to me, or if I felt sick at all, or something horrible happened to
got
me,
beat up or stabbed,
I would drag myself to the emergency room. I remember once I went to
we lost
hospital.
your camera there, Barbara.
Oh yeah, my battery. I remember once I went to the emergency room, and I was laying on a gurney in the hall. I'm plugging my phone in to the charger, and I remember feeling safer in the emergency room in a New York City hospital. I felt safer in the emergency room than I did anywhere else. And all I wanted to do was just stay there in that hospital emergency room and never leave. But anyway, yeah, no dental care. I know so many survivors that didn't have any medical care, any dental care the whole entire time, or throughout their lifespan. So I have
to speak on health.
Speak about physical health. It's not just me speaking and just sharing my story for an hour. I can do that definitely, but
sure.
It's about legislation and seeing what laws can be passed. When I started doing this in 2013, there were about 7 states that allowed survivors of sex trafficking that had been arrested and gotten a criminal record. There are only about 7 states that would allow those people to vacate those convictions. And what I'm saying is, people that never should have been arrested in the first place. Right. I was a child. I never would ever say that criminal person needs to have their record cleared. I don't believe that. But what I do believe is that if somebody got a criminal record and they should never have gotten that record, then that record should be expunged and vacated. Right. So I very much, lobby and worked over the years to try to make sure that every state allows survivors to do that. And I was blessed myself to clear my name and get all the records vacated off of my name.
Thank God.
That I got from New York City. New York was the first state to put that legislation on the books in 2010. And unfortunately, the state that we're sitting in now, the state of Virginia, that I'm sitting in now, the state of Virginia does not allow. Yeah, you are. That doesn't allow, this state does not allow anybody to vacate anything.
Yeah, and they say that they're for the people, but they're really not.
We've been working. Many fantastic groups have been working tirelessly to see if we can get this legislation to become a reality in the state of Virginia. But right now, like I said, in 2013, there were about 7 states, and now there are, I think, 40 something states. So it's
praise
gone up.
God.
Yeah.
And you're instrumental in that.
Well,
you are, because you have a voice. You should have been thrown out that window when you overdosed. You should have died
Yeah,
when you were
that's crazy.
stabbed. I'm sure you know plenty of other girls who died, so you weren't,
Yeah, I do.
you weren't, you weren't her. God preserved you. And then you just, anyway, I could keep singing your praises. But you speak. So if anybody wants to hire you to speak, you speak on, legislation, opiates, and this, you said the connection with opiates and sex trafficking or healthcare. What else do you speak on?
I mean, I could pull out any topic from, the topic of any subtopic of, human trafficking, identifying human trafficking. I've trained law enforcement, medical personnel, from my own experiences of being in hospitals and emergency rooms, what do first responders need to look for? What are some of the signs? There's a lot of information out there now about human trafficking and what it is and what it looks like. But amazingly, many people still aren't aware of what it is, but I mean, a lot more people are now than I think were when I started doing this in 2013.
Well, and because people like me are doing radio shows on it because we have no idea what to look for.
I think if every first responder and every person working in an emergency room knew what to look for, that would be great. But like I said, a lot of people, a lot are now, and law enforcement as well. Unfortunately, like when I was that young girl, being arrested in New York City, being taken into a police station in handcuffs and being rapid fire asked these questions, having my photo taken, having my fingerprints taken. It wasn't ever, wait a minute, how old are you really? Hold on a minute. You have on a lot of makeup, but how old are you? Wait a minute. And that didn't happen. And my behavior didn't help either, because sometimes, that behavior that I was exhibiting to these police officers, sometimes that looks like criminal behavior. I'm giving a false name, I'm fidgeting around or whatever I'm doing, so I looked and I behaved like a criminal. And actually a law was being broken. It wasn't like there was no law being broken. They were doing their job.
Right.
They were doing their job.
It's always about that extra step, Barbara. If they only knew, like Anita in that narcotics, rehabilitation.
In the clinic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, you were 23 years old when you said the first person looked you in the eyes and made you feel human. God help us.
I don't remember when I ever had that feeling before. I mean, I can't put a finger on when I had that feeling before, but she definitely took time. And I know nobody has time today, especially nobody has time. We're all multitasking. Everything's streaming. We're texting, we're clicking, we're whatever we're doing.
Well, but we all have 24 hours. It's the time we choose to make. How do we spend those 24? You have no more than me and no less than me. So one thing God made even.
This life is very, very short. And I wish everybody would know that. I keep bringing this up, but it is what it is. Having cancer twice and having this diagnosis for a year now of CML leukemia, it makes you come to a realization of how short your life is, And
what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on death? I was just talking to my girlfriend about that because we as Christians, I'm a devout Catholic, and we talk about, I cannot wait to get through this life so I can get to the one that is promised to be better. But so many people are afraid of that. What is your belief? Do you want to be here longer to get your voice out there longer? Is this something you're just not afraid of? Where do you sit on that?
I don't know. I mean, somebody was telling me that the other day. Somebody said kind of those words about, well, you just have to be so happy that you'll be there sooner. You'll be up in those magical, in other words, like I'll be in heaven sooner than, that's that. I should be
possibly,
so happy.
Maybe not.
I should be so thrilled and happy about that. But,
I hope I didn't imply that you should be happy.
No. Somebody else.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure I didn't. I'm seriously wanting to know where you are on this.
I think nobody's ever asked me that. I think I must be. I don't sit around. I don't. Even with this, I'm sorry, the cat's going crazy over there with this toy. I don't sit around and think, oh no, I'm going to be dead tomorrow. Oh no, I have this CML leukemia. I'm going to be dead. It's just not my attitude. And actually, I have to tell you, a close person, a family member, she said to me, you just go through life like nothing's going to happen to you. And I thought, okay, well, how would you like for me to go through life?
Well, you've spent a lifetime of going day to day to day, moment to moment. Maybe that was training for where you are today. If you have tomorrow, praise God for it. If you don't, then okay.
That's exactly how I feel. I mean, it's not that I go through life thinking nothing's going to happen to me. I go through life thinking I am going to see God. I am going to go to heaven, and I am going to be, and so if I go now, then I go now,
Yeah.
But I don't, I just know that whatever we do now on this with our time has to matter. And I think about him. I'm talking about Moses. I think about him, and what makes me sad. And I don't know if we have time, but I didn't tell you how I found out what happened to him.
Go ahead and tell me.
He died in prison. I found out one day when I was getting ready to vacate all my multiple convictions and this and that. And I found out middle of the night, 3 a.m. one night, I found out that he had actually been extradited, taken to prison in Akron. And I found out that he died in prison. I talked to the Akron Police Department the next day. They sent me his photo as it filled up my laptop screen. I started shaking decades later when I saw that face, and they told me that he died in prison. And I started shaking, and I put his photo up on my social media. And the reason I did that was so that anybody else that had been controlled by him would know that he was no longer on this earth. And a lot of people that saw his face that said things like, oh, I can't look at those eyes. He looks like a psychopath. Or you should go celebrate. Karma's a bitch. You should be happy and go celebrate. And I never felt like that. And I still don't feel like that. What I felt was this person, him, wasted their time on this earth doing what he did. He could have made such a difference in young people's lives instead of damaging their lives forever and ever. What?
He gave over to evil.
Yeah. And he could have made a difference in helped young people like I was, instead of exploiting them and ruining them, but that's what he did.
You're still standing. He tried to ruin you and he didn't. You're still standing. I mean, what an amazing.
I do think about that he died in prison and I didn't die in prison,
You didn't die at his hands.
I could have.
But let me ask you some success stories. There has to have been a man or a woman or a child that has come up to you after one of your talks or knowing about your life and saying, thank you for sharing. You have changed my life. Or you have any success stories based on?
I have many people that come to me after I've spoken, or actually what I have many people doing is almost on a daily basis contacting me. I have parents contacting me and saying things like, my daughter's missing. I don't know what I'm going to do. Could you please help me? Or this person is abusing and exploiting my child, my daughter. I don't know what to do. Can you help me? And that kind of, used to scare me a lot because I'm not a professional. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a police officer. And I would think, why are you contacting? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. But then I realized, and I realized, that I could guide them to the proper resources, obviously. And also they just want to talk to me a lot. They just want to speak to me and hear what I have to say. And then somehow that comforts them somehow. And it happens almost on a daily basis. And I've also had survivors, victims of human trafficking come up to me after I've spoken. One time a young woman, it was in Washington, D.C. at the press club. It was at this event that I spoke at. I keynoted at this event. After I spoke, shockingly, this young woman came, and I knew the man she was with was a customer, or whatever you want to call it. I knew from the minute I saw them walking towards me, I knew it was up, but whatever. Anyway, she started talking to me and she really wanted to get out of her situation. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I try to mentor people if I can, I try to mentor victims as much as I can and guide them in the path,
Yeah. You're a gift. You're a gift to those people. You're a gift to those people. You survived because God said, I'm not ready for you yet. You have a mission and you're completing that mission. And I'm not so sure that this cancer is a death sentence for you. It's going to take a lot more than some cancer cells to kill Barbara Amaya. You know what I mean? You've got a grace, a strength. I just keep seeing strength and courage in you is what I see.
Well, you're very kind. You know, this latest diagnosis, if anybody goes online and sees all my previous media, even in my TED Talk, horribly, I was obese, literally 100 pounds heavier. I mean, I was like, for the women that, I mean, I was a huge size.
Well,
And
you're 5'9", so.
yeah, thank God. Thank you for the height. Thank you. And so I began losing weight, and that was a blessing that I lost 100 pounds, but you know, happened kind of in a few months, which wasn't good. And people kept coming and saying, "You
What
look
are you
great.
doing?
What are you doing? How have you lost weight? Wow, what
The cancer diet."
And I didn't know, but I didn't know why. And you know, clueless, and I'd be like, I don't know. I guess I'm just blessed. Anyway, but that was a true blessing to lose the weight, you know, with that. But other than that, I guess what I'm trying to say is I didn't feel sick when I got the diagnosis. I was shocked. But I don't know.
For however many months or years you have left before you die, what would you like to accomplish?
I just want to make a difference in this world before I go. I'm so beyond blessed to have my book published. I never planned on writing a book ever. That's another thing. I have to say this before we go. I never planned on writing a book. I know people that contact me that say, I want to write a book. How did you publish your book with a publisher? How did you do that? And I go, it was another weird thing. I went to speak in Pittsburgh. I spoke at this event. This news reporter interviewed me. The next day when I was home, I got an email from a publishing house, my publishing house, Animal Media Group, and they asked me for my manuscript. And I thought, okay. I didn't have a manuscript, but
far it's in my brain.
I started, but I replied to their email and went, okay. And then I just kind of ran around and put it together. But, you know, then we, you know, obviously we worked on everything, but I didn't plan on, what I'm trying to say again, once again, God, I did not ever plan on writing a book. So what I'm, you know, I just want to make a difference in this world before I'm gone. And I do have the book out in the world. I have, you know, all my information and my words are in the world now. And that's all I want to do is just make a difference. I don't want anybody to ever have to experience what I did. Having said that, do I think that this is going to go away completely, no matter how hard we fight against human trafficking? I don't think it is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can we make a difference? Can we provide better services for victims? You know, do they need housing? Do they need training? Do they need, you know, re-entry skills back into the real world? You know, like I was, that young woman that didn't know how to do laundry or open a bank account. You know, it was like coming back from Mars, coming back from another planet, coming back to this world. I can't reiterate that enough.
Yeah.
You know,
and you need someone to hold your hand and mentor. I mean, maybe that's in your future. Just
definitely,
you know, mentoring a group of sex traffic survivors, mentoring those coming out, because you live the most horrible kind of life that trust is at the core of it. You know, so no one trusts.
Right.
And so you would be the one person someone coming out of trafficking would trust because you were there. And so
we see each other. We do. We see other victim survivors. We see each other. We feel, we know. I mean, like I said, I could be in a room full of 50 people and I would just know immediately. We see. And part of that, sadly or whatever, is, you know, one of the symptoms of complex PTSD is hypervigilance. You know, you can call it empath, call it whatever you want to call it, but I could be walking somewhere and you pick right up on someone's energy and vibe or whatever. I had to learn how to do that real quick.
Oh, Barbara, did we lose you? I think we may have lost today my guest, Barbara Amaya. Hopefully we'll get her to come back in here. She is a former victim of sex trafficking, and she was dealt with, obviously, daily rape. but she was shot. She was stabbed. She had an intersection with a serial killer that she had to talk to the police about. And she was on heroin, and it was actually trying to get help from that heroin that saved her. And so I wish her camera would unfreeze, but I just want to point you back towards her book. We did lose her, but point you to her book, Nobody's Girl, which you can find on her website, barbaraamaya.com, BARBARAAMAYA. And I didn't get a chance to ask her on the show. Oh, she's coming back in. Did not get a chance to ask her yet, but I'm going to ask her. Barbara, I was able to keep on talking, not knowing if you were going to be back. We can see you, but we can't hear you yet. So I'll let you play with your mic. There you go.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. It said connecting or something.
That's okay. So I was telling my listeners, just kind of bringing us back up to par. But I do know that probably for the sake of time, we'll need to go. Let me ask you this. Name one thing, Barbara, you would have our listeners do differently as a result of something they heard today. Just one thing.
One thing that I would have them do differently?
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask people to try, no matter what your belief systems are, I want to repeat that, no matter what your belief systems may be, to just try to see each other as fellow human beings and view each other with kindness and compassion.
Yeah.
And just try to do that, no matter what your belief systems may be in your day-to-day life. Try to see each other as fellow human beings and treat each other with respect, kindness, and compassion. And that's it.
That's it. Barbara, I was telling them when you were unconnected and reconnecting, barbaraamaya.com. They can get your book, Nobody's Girl, there. You can also get it on Amazon and all those other places. But if you go straight to Barbara, I know this, that she'll get more of her profit that way. We lost you again, your camera.
It's a phone call coming in. That's
happening.
Yeah.
So we try to do these radio shows through computers, but we're not always able to. So we're just very grateful that Barbara was able to do the show on such short notice and using her phone. Barbara, one last thing. So they can get your book on Audible. They can get it on your website, barbaraamaya.com. You can be hired for speaking engagements. Anything else? What was that?
Yes, speaking and training, first responders, law enforcement, a lot of universities use my TED Talk and I have, multiple trainings, but a lot of educators use my resources.
So as long as I send them to your website, that's kind of like any message you want to get out that I haven't touched on, anything. Oh.
No.
What a blessing you are. You are.
Thank you. Thank you for talking with me.
You are, one day you and I are going to be in heaven together. And of course, all the darkness will be behind us. And to know that you lived this life that couldn't get you down. And then when you turn around in heaven and you look and you see all those people behind you that are in heaven because of you, that because you shared your story, because you wrote your book, I think that will be a time where you'll able to look back and say, it was all worth it. I got through it, So God bless you. And each and every one of you listening, I do want to, tell you, go to her website.
And I promise I'm going to update my website today. It's sadly neglected, but I will.
I looked at your website. It looks pretty good.
I'll put the million events that I've done since the last blog post. I swear I'm going to put them up.
The Bloodfest, is that what you call it?
The last blog post was a while ago.
Got it.
So I've been in Belfast. By the way, I came back from Belfast on March 23rd of last year, right when the pandemic was hitting. Anyway, I almost got stuck there, but I want to update my website with photos, fresh photos. That's what I'm trying to say.
And she will, but there's a lot of really good stuff on the website already now. Art exhibits that have been done because of it. So barbaraamaya.com. Barbara, you look like you had one more thing to say. Please don't think I'm cutting you off.
No. You mentioned Kate Chernush, Our Works for Freedom. That's a fantastic, beautiful. That nonprofit is very powerful. Art Works for Freedom.
But they
And
can
art
get that
is-
when they go to your website. We're just
Yeah,
going to point
yeah.
them to you. And if you
Definitely.
forget this, just go to my website here, of course, breakfastwithbacon.com. For those of you watching on YouTube or other places, breakfastwithbacon.com. You will see this show again. Share it away. Share it with everyone that you know, because we all need to know what to look for. If we can help a soul, just hope no one else has to go through what Barbara did, though sadly we know they might fight, and be courageous. But I do have to take us off the air. So Barbara, I want to thank you one more time for your time. And to each of you listeners, I want to say, I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon. And I want to remind you always to live your life sunny side up.